Hey, and welcome to Talkin Smack Intellectually. I'm your host, the upsetter, always upsetting the status quo. That's right. I hope you guys are feeling really good today. I know I'm feeling really great. I had a wonderful interview with Jayce Baron, the renowned Jayce Baron, and I'm going to share that with you today. And I hope to captivate your hearts, captivate your minds with this interview. So in early 2022, Jayce Baron led the way in creating a powerful documentary entitled Beyond Ed Buck, alongside Emmy Award winner Haley Sahar. This film made its mark on AMC's streaming platform, All Black, and took the film festival circuit by storm. It won multiple awards. Jayce's incredible work has been featured in top-tier publications like Forbes, Billboard Magazine, The Hollywood Reporter. The list goes on and on and on. His dedication to social impact has caught the attention of high-profile names and high-profile politicians, even the President Joe Biden, and prestigious organizations nationwide. So I want you to join me in this very inspirational conversation as we dive into Jayce's commendable journey of advocacy, filmmaking, and community engagement. Here we go. So I'm going to start with Beyond Ed Buck, the powerful documentary, which had a multifaceted approach. It delved into systemic issues beyond just the true crime elements. It called out white supremacy within queer spaces and shared light on pervasive transphobia and homophobia present within Black communities. Can you share the inspiration behind creating this documentary?
Yeah, of course. So Beyond Ed Buck is a contribution to the community that I live in my existence. So it actually just first started when Jamel, who is Ed Buck's first known victim that was made public, when he was killed in his apartment, a lot of people in the community were reaching out to me to do something because they had gained a little bit of news, with KPLA and, news articles, but it wasn't getting the same traction as it should. And so at the time I was, doing advocacy work. And so people were reaching out to me like, hey, can you help bring light to the situation? And so, I was in my 20s at the time and I was like, okay, well, I'm not necessarily a politician. I'm really an attorney, but I do know how to make film.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of started pre-production on making this project. And, being part of the community, I kind of saw it from a different lens. I know people are saying like true crime, but for me, there are several Ed Bucks that I've encountered on a personal level. And so this story wasn't necessarily that far-fetched, but it's the one that made the media.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had to kind of take a look back at the bigger picture. Like, okay, there's all these elements, like you mentioned before, the the homophobia, socioeconomic status. Like, why was this elder white man able to take advantage of these young Black queer kids and get away with it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really the thing that kind of ignited it. And in the middle of production, Timothy Dean actually passed away. So, he was killed as well at the hands of Ed Buck. And so we went to the Ed Buck's house for the protest, and we were just very live and in real time. So some of the footage in the film is actually us, there ourselves filming what was going on. In the beginning of the film, I kind of start off with, I was at Ed Buck's house and, showing footage of that and kind of recapping what happened. And then, moving forward, Haley Sahar, who's best known from Pose,
Mm-hmm.
joined on the team, and she brought another perspective with addressing trans lives and how they're really, really disregarded and forcing the sex work and all these different elements.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just really opened up the scope to have all these different multiple conversations, but kind of tie it into one conversation of how we're all human beings. We all deserve the right to live the basic necessities of life, and we all deserve to be cared about. So
Right.
that's kind of the scope of how that all came together. And, it did very well in the film festival circuit with, 17 film festivals and several wins nationally, local, and internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just really happy that this really was a message that was able to resonate with people just to humanize those.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the documentary did receive critical acclaim, and it did raise awareness on important issues within the LGBTQ plus community. Jayce, how do you feel the film served? It did serve as a call to action, urge viewers to become better allies to Black LGBTQ plus individuals, What changes did you witness in the attitudes and actions of different people who may have viewed the documentary or after watching the documentary or in close proximity to your work?
Yeah, so I will say that the film festival circuit was interesting to be on. I remember specifically in Canada, we had a screening at the Toronto Film Festival, and there was Q&A after, and it's a huge auditorium, and I think maybe one person, and I'm not going to be blunt, it was a lot of white people in the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one person asked a question publicly, and they're like, okay, well, that's it. And then we left, and then when I tell you there was a line of people wanting to speak with us because they were so taken aback at what they had just seen. And I think they needed a minute to process it. But then, like, after that, it was just regurgitation of, like, okay, like, what, like, I don't even know how to feel right now because it does take you on a journey
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning to the end of the film. And so, I'm happy that it has been received the way that it was supposed to be received. It's supposed to make people think. Like you said, call to action. That was one of the big things. Like, okay, how are we moving forward after we see the film? How are we, treating people differently? How are we having conversations in our own private spaces after this conversation or after this film? And so, and even my own family, I come from a religious background as well as Haley. And, they were messaging us and saying, like, thank you for making this film. It's definitely shed a light on something that we may not be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just wanted to broaden the scope of people's awareness of what's going on in their own backyard.
Right, for sure. And in popular, particularly Black popular culture, the use of terms like no homo and now the new term no diddy can potentially shape negative perceptions and attitudes towards the LGBTQ plus community. How do you think the use of such terms in high profile cases like involving Diddy portrayed in like a mocking manner? How do you think that impacts the community at large?
Well, I know no homo. I've never heard no diddy, but I know no homo. That was something that was kind of addressed. Even, oh, that's gay, using that as a negative connotation. I mean, I think using anyone's identity as an insult is inappropriate. And, it's violent. That could be misconstrued in so many different ways. And so I think it's just being consciously aware. I think a lot of people just say things because it's trendy. They say things because it's popular or getting traction. I mean, it's slang, but not really putting thought into what they're actually saying.
Right.
So I think it's also something to be mindful of what we're saying and what we're putting out there because something could be a fad, but it could actually be harmful as well. So someone brings it up.
Mm-hmm. And let's speak a little bit more towards your political advocacy work, your involvement in passing SB 813, which involved revoking the statute of limitation on rape charges in California. That was truly commendable. How did this experience shape your perspective on advocacy and community service?
Yeah, so just to give full context, SB 813 revoked the statute of limitations on rape charges in California. And that whole situation just kind of came about very serendipitously.
Mm-hmm.
I came forward with my story of sexual assault, and it went completely viral online. 600,000 people had viewed and read my story within a matter of days, and it almost hit 1 million views within a week. And after that, Mike Gibson, who's an assembly member and now a friend of mine based out of Los Angeles, he had called me and said, hey, I read your story. We're having a press conference with Gloria Allred and Connie Leva in Sacramento. I'd love for you to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And a couple months later, Jayce Baron, who was the governor at the time, signed the bill. And it just really, I will be transparent. It was very overwhelming for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was already doing advocacy work, but I had never really used my personal story to bring a point to the table. And so it was a bit overwhelming for me at the time. I wasn't really calculating the response that I could have gotten. Mm-hmm. And so, but I had to realize that my story, my situation was bigger than myself.
Right.
And so, and for me, the reason why I put it out there was to let people know, like, hey, I'm a person who has gone through a trauma and I made it triumphant and I have healed from it. I worked through it because my rape happened almost 1.5 years before I actually said it publicly. And so I had done the work myself to, get myself together. And once I did, I was like, wow, I know I'm not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was evident with the thousands of emails I received after that article went viral. So, for me, I just want people to find peace,
Mm-hmm.
no matter who you are, male, woman, non-binary, LGBT, heterosexual, whatever. I want people to find peace and just know that their situations that happen to them are not the totality of their existence.
Mm-hmm.
It's an isolated event and something that happens, and you have the power, you have the resources to really overcome that and make it even something bigger and more meaningful in life.
And so sorry you had to experience that. Thank you so much for sharing that story and making a safe space for individuals to connect and share theirs as well. With the progress of the Me Too movement, individuals like Cassie and yourself bravely sharing your experiences, how can we establish more safe environments for men to open up about their encounters with sexual assault or rape? And what steps can we take to ensure that they feel supported and at ease when sharing their stories?
Yeah, well, I think first is, realize that this is something that's very common. 1 in 6 men are assaulted.
Mm.
And so it is something that if you think about going to a football game or the mall or the movies, think about how many people in that space have been a victim or a survivor of assault.
Mm-hmm.
And so just think about the numbers and realize how common it is. And then two, ask questions. I did a PSA last year for Male Survivor Awareness Day, sponsored by Beam and Male Survivor. And I reached out to my friend who does a lot of work in mental health, who I've known since I was 18 years old. And, I just asked him, like, hey, do you know anybody who has any male who's been assaulted? And he was like, yeah, me. And I've known this person for, over 15 years, and he's never shared that with me. And he knows my story. He interviewed me for his platform about my story, but he never confronted me. And later, when I asked him, I was like, well, why didn't you share that with me?
Mm-hmm.
Or why did you decide to, come on this platform? He said, you asked me. And it was as simple as that. And so I think just asking questions, and being open to conversation. A lot of men are not asked about their emotions or feelings or experiences, especially with that topic. So I just think that opening up the floor for people to speak is just really important. And as far as Cassie goes, Cassie and I are about the same age.
Mm.
And I started in the industry around the time that she was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, ironically, my friend was in her music video who I interviewed who was assaulted. And I remember reading her story and seeing so many parallels when it comes to ageism, when it comes to just the predatory nature of older people in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and how people kind of turn a blind eye for the sake of fame and glitz and glam. I think one thing to also realize is that Hollywood is a land of mirrors. Not everything's what it seems.
Right.
And people will always put the best foot forward and make it seem like it's something that it may not be. And so I've been in one thing with my more, I guess, violent assault. I had to realize that that's not the first time that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of went back and chronicled my own personal journey with encounters with older people in the industry when I was, modeling when I was 19 and 20, and I was kind of more in front of the camera in that capacity back then, and I had encounters with people and very predatory things when I was younger, but these people were, twice my age, sometimes over twice my age.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm happy that she is speaking out about her experiences and, taking the courage to do that, because some people don't believe you and they'll just take your story for, someone complaining, like, oh, well, you got X, Y, and Z, and, you did this because of the money. But it doesn't matter what someone did or did not do. It's a matter that this is a predator in the state, in the situation,
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be held accountable.
Right. And I know I was on a Clubhouse yesterday and we were just speaking about that. And it's real quite interesting to hear people talk about a time frame for victims to come forward. Like, well, you should come forward. It shouldn't take you this long, and all these different pressures and almost like a victim shaming, which sits very uncomfortable for me. So I really was quite astonished that so many people turned the tables on the victims. And It just asks for them to be more compassionate and understand that trauma hits people in different ways. Not everyone's going to have this heroic, tenacious spirit to come forth immediately. Sometimes it's a processing. You just don't know how it would impact someone. And we got to make those safe spaces, as you mentioned. And so, again, thank you for the work that you do. Do you believe it is a social obligation for celebrities to utilize their platforms to advocate for issues like this?
No, I don't.
Mhm.
I think that people, well, I'll speak to a certain demographic of celebrities. I think that people love the art. They
Mhm.
love the acting, the singing, the art.
Mhm.
And, what comes with that is the celebrity. And so I think that, I think it's great that people have the attention of the public. I think it's a very, very, very powerful thing to have. I also think that people are people at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And, and this is a testament of myself, and I'm not a celebrity, but, using my personal story had a huge, I would say probably just as big as impact on my life than the actual assault. It's a different walk of life when people know certain personal things about you. And, for a long time, I'm not going to say I regretted it, but I definitely questioned, like, why did I put this news out there? Why did I do this?
Mm.
Because it shaped everything around me, my friends, my relationships, my sex life, like, because became public knowledge. And that's something that I just had to grapple with and deal with. And there was a little bit of trauma even with, coming forward and using myself as kind of the sacrificial lamb, if you will, to help other people. But again, that's kind of how I looked at it back then.
Mhm.
Now I'm like, okay, this was bigger than me, but it's something that I also, live with.
You made quite a name for yourself as a filmmaker, to also serving as a neighborhood council member in the city of Los Angeles. How do you balance your creativity, or your creative endeavors rather, with the community service? And what do you hope to achieve through your role as the neighborhood council?
Yeah. So I always say my tagline is the intersection of advocacy and entertainment.
Mm.
So everything that I attach myself to has some form of advocacy in it. Like, for example, we're working on the Sir Lady Jobber project, who was the first Black trans woman in the 1960s to perform with Fred Fox, Lena Horne, Richard Pryor, Jayce Baron. So we're doing her story, and that's a huge sense of advocacy because she actually challenged the LAPD
Mhm.
to get her rights back to perform in whatever attire that she wanted to. And she did that for everybody. That was in 1968, and she's still alive today. And so, again, Haley, who we did Beyond That Buck story with, is playing her as well as executive producing. Anthony Hemingway is on board as a director. So that's a huge form of advocacy. As far as the council goes, I'm a very roll up your sleeves, get gritty and like in it. And, entertainment, there's a little bit of a distance from the people because you're making something for the people, but, that's not really like a hands-on thing.
Mhm.
And so for me, I wanted to be more of an asset to my community and kind of get to the nitty gritty of things and kind of tackle these issues that I constantly see when I walk down the street or drive down the freeway. And so that was my main thing. And also, too, I was actually last night, I was appointed as an advisory board to the DA. And so
Congrats.
now I sit on that board as well. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. So I sit on that board as well. So, I'm such a hands-on person with everything that I do. And so I wanted to make myself an asset to my community and bring different perspectives to the work that's being done. Because I think that a lot of people have good intentions,
Mhm.
but I also think that it's important to have, a balanced set of opinions and
Mhm.
outlooks and lived experiences when assessing what's the right move to make for everybody.
Right. And the 2024 presidential elections are on the horizon. What are your thoughts
So
on
yeah,
the What are your thoughts on the potential impact of this election on marginalized communities? And then how do you see your role in advocating for social justice aligning with the upcoming political landscape?
yeah. So we all remember 2016,
Mm.
and not to get too deep into that, but, people are Trump, 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 but, what it really is what his presence ignites within our own personal neighbors and the hatred that could come out. Almost like how we were talking about before with, using no homo or gay as a slur, people are not necessarily cognizant of what they're saying and how that could translate into something that is, violent. I was at the White House last week, and I took a meeting with one of the advisors for the Biden-Harris administration, and we were talking about the TikTok. And, I was like, what, it's not so much the data and everything. Like your phone is pretty much already tapped. Like if you have your Bluetooth on, someone could hack it. It's like we're past that point with technology. The real issue that I see is that the misinformation is out there, because that information that's put out there could translate into something that is a hate crime in real time. Someone could see a TikTok and take something for face value, but then when they're walking down the street or down the mall, they could see someone who may be a trans person, or someone who may be queer, or someone who may be Islam, or a woman, and they can have a perception about them on false information that's put online. And so it's really important to just control narrative and not give people the liberty to storm the Capitol or to attack a neighbor. And so, when I look at the election, I kind of again look at the broader scope, what could happen, not only with legislation, but what could happen just within our own communities. And so I think it's really important to get out and vote. People are saying, the lesser two are evils, but you have to realize that your vote matters. Please get out and vote. It is so important to get out. We live in America. It is a democracy. It is your birthright to get out there and make a change. Other countries don't even have that. So, do your research and just vote however you want to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but get out and vote because your voice matters.
Absolutely. And you've been such an inspiration to many people. I love to hear about individuals who have influenced you and supported you. Could you share some key people who have impacted your journey and inspired your community work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, my parents are a huge influence in everything that I do. My father, he was a Marine, and he's a tough guy, and he's such a sweetheart. He was actually a sergeant in the Marines, guns and everything like that. I don't know, but even when I disclosed with him, my queerness, he was like, okay, sure, and like it was really nothing, and that really, it was like a terrifying moment. I was like early 20s. I was living in New York, and I was just like, I didn't know, but the fact that he was just so delicate with me in that moment, and really just didn't care. Like, you're my son. Like, I love you. And so, that's really motivated me. And my mother, she was born in Panama and, raised in New York, and she's a physician, has her own, business and a private practice and everything like that. And so she, just seeing her and her work ethic and her love for everybody, I mean, has really inspired me. And I grew up with that. I remember going to Costco and people running up to her like, Dr. Lita, and like seeing that personality kind of come out. So that's really inspired. And last year, I will say this just really quickly, I did lose 3 mentors of mine, which kind of ignited another passion within me to kind of continue to do the work. One of them was Jareth Madison. He was the editor-in-chief of Obvious Magazine. He gave me my first writing opportunity, and he passed away last January. And then Ivan Daniel, he was a mentor of mine. He actually appointed me on his advisory board for a nonprofit here in Los Angeles for Black queer youth. And then my grandmother, she worked with Jimmy Carter. She was born in a train car in Alabama and made her way to walking the Olympics torch across Hartford, Connecticut, and being an educator and doing so many things for the community. And just to see her journey from the 1930s to, last year, it was really, it always inspired me. Like, her travel, I mean, she went to Russia, and like, as a Black woman in 1960s, I mean, that's who she was. And so, she wasn't how to put this, pie baking, huggy duggy, grandmother. but she did ignite a responsibility in myself as well as my siblings and my cousins to just do the best always.
Mhm.
Always do the best. And so I've had a lot of, thankfully, had a lot of influences in my life that have kind of shaped the way I see the world and see myself.
Mm-hmm. And building on the legacy of those who have inspired you, how do you envision continuing to empower future generations and fostering a sense of unity, social responsibility, all of that within community and beyond?
Yeah, well, I think that putting people first
Mhm.
is just the most important. I think that if you lead with that, everything that will come with that will be genuine. And so I think that people tend to complicate things a lot.
Mhm.
Even when I see these details of these policies and these laws, I'm just like, oh my God, like, what is going on? Like, what is good for human beings as a people? Like, take away race, gender, all these things. Like, those things do not matter. We're here for a short amount of time, and then we
Mhm.
leave. So, like, how are we working together to mobilize and just do better for all of us? And I think once people kind of take a step back and see that we're all just here trying to get out here unscathed and just be at peace and live our lives and laugh and clink glasses and, meet great people. I think that we'll really have a better understanding of like what moves to make this place a better place.
Mhm.
It's never going to happen, or at least not in my lifetime,
Mhm.
but I do think there is there is a fight and a turn for righteousness. And
Mhm.
I think that we're kind of leaning on the history that we've had. I mean, look at the civil rights movement.
Right.
We've come so far from there, but there's still work to be done.
Mhm.
So, knowing the history is also important. Like, what have the people before us done for us?
Mhm.
Sir Lady Zava is a prime example. This person went against LAPD, and RuPaul and Ellen DeGeneres and, Kiss, they would not be able to perform in Los Angeles without this trans woman back in the 1960s who, had the courage and the tenacity to go against the law to have it changed. So
Mhm.
knowing our history too is also extremely important.
And then as you continue your path of advocacy and community service, can you share some of your forthcoming projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mentioned Java already. Actually, in the process of a documentary film about my family. So just to kind of give a brief overview, my family found out through a DNA test that we actually have ancestors who were in Boston who were part of the the Underground Railroad, who housed runaway slaves and employed them. Anthony Burns was one of them. He was the one that ignited the Fugitive Slave Act. And so we're in talks with some officials in Boston to get the building as a landmark in Boston. And we're planning on filming that and doing a whole bit on that. So that's really I actually had some of those calls yesterday, so it's fresh, but it's something that we're really looking forward to capturing on film, but also experiencing in real time. And also my book as well. But
Mhm.
yeah, the book is being written.
Very nice, very nice. Final words for emerging future leaders, activists. What advice would you give them?
Know your power and know your worth. I think that a lot of times people tend to uh, water down their value because of whatever experiences they have been through, what's been told to them. But realize that every single person on this planet has a voice and has the power to make change. Every single person does. So it's a matter of what you do with that power and the courageousness behind, putting forth your best foot forward. And we all make mistakes. I have made several mistakes in my life, but just stay true to yourself and keep going because it will get tough. You'll need a cup of coffee every once in a while to get through some of these days. But in the end, it is worth it, and you never know who's watching you.